When driving north on Interstate 5 towards Sacramento, you pass through Stockton, California. Stockton, California is located just 20 miles away from where I grew up. But what I'm about to tell you was never taught to me or anybody in my hometown. Little did I know that just 20 minutes away, a piece of Filipino-American history was trying to be erased. This is a crosstown freeway. This freeway connects Interstate 5 and Interstate 99 across the city of Stockton. But just off of this freeway is a historical site. This McDonald's. Well, not exactly. This McDonald's and 76 gas station is home to what KQED has called a cornerstone of the Filipino community in downtown Stockton. So how did a cornerstone of minority group go from this to a McDonald's and a 76 gas station? This is the story of Little Manila. In the 1920s, there was an increasing demand for physical labor. Because of this, there was an influx of Filipino immigrants to the United States. They hoped of reaching the promised land, where the streets were paved with gold, where they could accomplish their American dream. This influx of Filipino workers was so dramatic that in the 1920s, the population was estimated to be about 26,000 Filipino Americans. And in less than 10 years, that number skyrocketed to 100,000. The majority of these Filipinos landed in Stockton, California. In fact, the Stockton population was so big that Stockton, California was home to the most Filipinos outside of the Philippines. As Dawn Mabalan stated in her book, Little Manila is in the heart. The pull to Stockton soon became so strong for some Filipino or Filipina immigrants that they came to the city after almost immediately landing in San Francisco, Seattle, or Los Angeles. Thousands of Filipino Americans can trace their roots back to Stockton, California. Of course, since it was the 1930s, anti-discriminatory laws were still in place and segregation was very real. All the Filipinos who immigrated to America to achieve the American dream were never allowed to do so because of the color of their skin. They were never given a chance at the education they hoped for, and they weren't allowed in certain areas of Stockton, specifically North Stockton, because they weren't white. So in response, the Filipinos created Little Manila. This whole area used to be filled with restaurants, grocery stores, and barbershops. In fact, Stockton City directories show that from 1924 to 1975, more than 60 Filipino-owned businesses were made in this 6-block radius, such as this one. This is the Rizal Social Club, one of the places where Filipinos would gather together to dance and socialize. Advertisers called it the only exclusive and air-conditioned streamlined club in America. Even back then, we cared about AC. Or aircon. The Filipinos created a community, a place where they could help themselves and each other direct through this new way of life in America, whilst also bringing with them a taste of what it was like back home. But then in 1955, everything changed. After World War II, there was a nationwide movement to get rid of slums and blights in poor neighborhoods. Due to this, it didn't take long for the Northern California chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union would file a complaint in Stockton, California. This was Dean LaCarley. He was the mayor at the time, and his committee saw that Little Manila was an eyesore, claiming that the growth of Little Manila was cancer-like. In 1955, he declared a clearance of these communities. And then in 1956, City Council created the Redevelopment Agency and authorized it to carry out urban development projects in the city. They targeted 9 blocks of clearance, demolishing a huge part of Little Manila, leaving only 4 blocks of Little Manila left. By the 1960s, an increase in freeway expedition became popular in America. Highway officials, politicians, and businessmen believed that Stockton had the potential to become the hub of California, connecting Northern California and Southern California exchanges. They envisioned a freeway across Stockton, connecting Interstate 99 and Interstate 5. Sound familiar? Their proposed plan would cut to 2 of the remaining 4 blocks of Little Manila. A public hearing was held on January 1st, 1961, but on December 27th, 1971, City Council approved the plan. By April 1972, the state cleared all the property in the way of the freeway. 20 years later, in 1993, the freeway was completed. What highway engineers promised to make downtown a better place has now become a physical barrier between the two sides of Stockton. A recent city council member has even called it the Great Wall of Downtown. It still separates the predominantly white north side of Stockton from the predominantly Black, Latino, and Asian south. And that brings us here, November 30, 2020. Now that you know about the infamous Crosstown Freeway and the amount of gentrification that occurred here, one must ask, what's left of Little Manila? With works of activists like Dawn Mabalan and organizations like Little Manila Rising, 3 buildings were able to remain in Stockton, California. One of them, Club Rio de Janeiro, and the other 2, Mariposa Hotel, and behind me was the Rizal Social Club that I mentioned before. Recently, this was demolished about a month ago, showing that even till this day, the fight to remember the history of Little Manila remains.